Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Black Beauty Activist Podcast. I am Dr. Tameka Ellington, your host. For those of you that don't know me, I am a fashion scholar, empowerment speaker, author, and a lover of all things Black culture. The Black Beauty Activist Podcast is a platform where we discuss critical conversations to disrupt westernized beauty standards and raise the consciousness and confidence of the Black community. Today is Indigenous Peoples Day, and so I wanted to just take a moment to give honor to the individuals. My home is in Akron, Ohio, and we are on the land of the indigenous Wyandotte, Iroquois, Delaware, the Shawnee, and the Miamis were in my area. And throughout Akron, there's tons of monuments in the city dedicated to our previous Native brothers and sisters. And so I just want to honor them today and honor those that were that are ancestors now and honor those that are still among us. And so today we're going to be talking about a topic that is still very near and dear to me and still very touchy to me. It's still very sometimes difficult to talk about because of the fact that it's so close and because of the fact that it happens to so many of us. And what I'm talking about is I'm going to be talking about Black women in the academy. Black people, period, in the academy oftentimes have a lot of struggles. And many of you all may know my story of being the very first Black professor at Kent State University's fashion school. Those were some of the most exhilarating times of my life. Also, some of the most soul crushing times of my life. Exhilarating because I got to do what I love. I love fashion. I love to teach design. I love to be with students, but soul crushing because I constantly felt like I was being watched, felt like my colleagues, was waiting for me to mess up. I knew that they thought that I wasn't talented enough to be in the department. And for the first 2 years while I was on the tenure track as a professor, I believed them. And, my story, oftentimes I do discuss how I was able to move beyond that, and it's a powerful thing to be able to get to a point in your life where you don't allow others' opinions to rule or stagnate your life. And so if you are a Black woman and you're listening to this, you're in the academy, maybe if you're not in the academy, you're in some other discipline or working career in the field. And maybe you were the first. Maybe you still are the only Black woman in your department or on your team. This show is definitely for you because Black women are faced with double consequences. So we are faced with being Black, and then we are also, faced with being a woman. And oftentimes we are the lowest women. We have to fight the hardest in regards to intelligence, in regards to beauty. Black people, Black women in particular, are looked at as the lesser. And I know this about the fighting, and I know this about the lesser because I've lived it throughout my career. And in today's episode, my next guest and I have a connection. And she was also the first Black woman to work in fashion department at her institution. I was introduced to her from a friend of mine and my brand manager, Meredith Leon McCormick. Meredith knew about my story, and when she connected me with Professor Jones, she knew that it was going to be an amazing, dynamic conversation, one that was an authentic conversation about the challenges and triumphs that Black women have had in the academy. And so we're going to go ahead and get started, and I'll introduce you to my guests, Black beauty activists viewers today. It is my pleasure to introduce you to Professor Adrienne Jones. Thank you for being here, Professor Jones.
Good evening, Dr. Tameka, and thank you for having me this evening. I just want to start
Absolutely.
by making a correction.
Yes.
I don't believe I was the first Black professor in the department. but I'm the first Black female to get a
Yes.
full-time tenured position at Pratt.
Yes.
Not just in the department, but in the entire school.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. And that's in your bio. I think you mentioned that in your bio, right? The first
Yes.
Black woman. Yes. Okay. You know what? Even though, even though you may not have been the very first, right? There is still lots of issues, challenges, things that you had to overcome working in that space. And so we are going to definitely, jump into some of those things. And Professor Jones, she taught in the fashion department at Pratt Institute for over 30 years. She holds the honor of being the first Black woman to achieve full-time tenure status at Pratt. Professor Jones teaches in the School of Professional Studies, where she developed fashion curricula for the adult education and pre-college programs. For over 20 years, she served as faculty advisor for Fashion Society, and twice received the Outstanding Organization Advisor Award for her work and dedication with the Student Club. Professor Jones also was chosen to represent the School of Design as one of 5 scholars for the Inclusive Pedagogy Scholars Program, which investigated and reported on the challenges of diversity and inclusion on the Pratt campus. In 2014, Professor Jones conceived and co-curated the landmark exhibit Black Dress, which honored Black designers and addressed the lack of diversity in the fashion industry. The Black Dress Project was since expanded to a resource website, a YouTube channel, and Black Dress Salon, a gathering of notable fashion creatives to discuss fashion and culture. Professor Jones is currently working and she's currently writing the companion book to the exhibition and working on expanding and touring the exhibit. A few years after the exhibit closed, she also began working as a consultant for the National Museum of African American History and Culture. Professor Jones was chosen as one of the esteemed moderators for their recent symposium, Fashion, Culture, Futures, African American Ingenuity, Activism, and Storytelling. She has appeared in 2 documentaries, Dark Girls 2, which explores the disquieting subject of colorism in women, and The Leveling Lincoln, which explores the history behind the landmark 1961 desegregation case in her hometown of New Rochelle, New York. In addition, Professor Jones is a painter, a photographer, and a fashion designer specializing in leather and suede looks for her private clientele. And that's also something that we have in common. When I was working and designing, leather was one of my media of choice. I often use leather in my design work. When I was a young person, I learned how to do tooling on leather, so I can draw any picture on leather, etch it out, carve it up on leather for you and make it look fabulous. And so when I saw that you also love and working with leather, that made me happy. That made me smile. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Yes. Yes. So we're going to jump on into this conversation. Please tell us a little bit about your background, how you grew up, and how you got interested in fashion.
Well, like you mentioned, I'm a New Yorker from the suburbs. Um, and my base has always been fine art. I was the kid who helped to paint the backdrops for the school plays in elementary school. Um, that developed into more insight in art, creating jewelry, which I don't do anymore. I know everybody knows me for wearing my jewelry, but I'm not doing jewelry designing, um, painting, and photography. And then a dear friend of my mom's who had an atelier in Harlem passed away and left me her sewing machine.
Wow.
And I'm also a real gadget girl. So to teach myself how to sew, I took the machine apart, put
Mm.
it back together again, and then figured out from there how the mechanics of the machine worked and started making my own clothes. Um, and then it was a high school advisor who said to me, "Well, what do you love to do?" I had applied to schools for psychology and for art. And at the time, I was making all these great clothes. And I said, "Oh, well, I love to dance." No, I said, "I love to make clothes and I love to dance." And she said, "That's it. You're going to FIT." And that was the start of the start of my fashion career as far as school was concerned.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. You know, it sounds like this was something that sparked in you when you were very young. And I had known ever since I was probably about 13 or 14 that I wanted to do something in art, in fashion in particular. I learned how to, and this is something that young people that may be watching, they have absolutely no idea about. But long time ago, we had a class called home economics.
Yes.
And in home economics, I learned how to sew and I absolutely loved it. And that's what I knew what I wanted to do for the rest of my life was to sew and design clothing. So from a young age, and it sounds like when you were young, you had this knowing that this was something that you enjoyed to do. Mhm.
Well, I've heard my mother tell people she believes I painted my way out of the womb. Um,
Mm.
I always had pen, paper, crayons, paintbrush, always in my hand. Um, so that was just something I don't know anything else but that,
Mhm.
you know.
Mhm.
And I'm very grateful that my parents, without having to understand where I came from, just supported me in doing that
Yeah,
because it
yeah.
gave me an opportunity just to create um, and live a lifestyle creating.
Yeah, yeah. And that's so important as a professor. I've come across students who I taught not only college, but I taught high school too. I got a chance to teach the in the Ohio area. We have a program called Trio, which is the umbrella program for Upper Bound, and so I got a chance to teach some Upper Bound high school students. And I
Mhm.
had one girl in particular who really wanted to be in fashion, but her mother forced her to get into nursing because her mother didn't think that she had a future in fashion. And so, it always pains me when I think about the fact that some parents just don't support their children, on their journey of whatever it is they might want to do. And so you being able to have parents that support it and allowed you the space to be able to figure out what you wanted to do on your own. I think it's a blessing to be able to have that.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. And I'm
Yeah.
sure that, I know for a fact because my mother voiced her opinion after I finished school. She said, "You sure you don't want to take some classes in business?" And I was like, "Oh my, I'll be fine. I'll be just fine." Um, but it's hard because if you come from a family and they're struggling, and especially in these days and times when higher education is so expensive, they
Yeah.
want to make sure that they're getting their money's worth. And we've all
Absolutely.
heard the term starving artist.
Oh yeah.
But I truly believe that if you get the opportunity to do what you love, you will succeed.
Yeah.
You just have to
Yeah.
stay at it.
Absolutely. So, how did you know that you had a calling to want to teach? So, being a fashion designer is one thing, but then becoming an educator is a whole nother thing. So, how did you know you had a calling to do that?
Oh, Dr. Tameka, there wasn't there wasn't a calling. It wasn't like that. I was happily designing in the industry, and I call her, well, she's family. This is part of my chosen family, also a mentor. She was teaching at Pratt at the time, and another professor took ill, and she recommended me. Um, and I essentially got the job over the phone.
Mm,
But I
mm,
got the job because the person who recommended me was white, and they assumed that I was white too.
wow.
So when I came in to sign the paperwork, I think all of us have been through a time when we speak to somebody on the phone first, and then we meet them, and then they give that look that they're trying not to give, like, oh, she's
Mhm.
Black. So I got that look. And you know, at first, the chair of the department at the time, she looked at me and she says, "Oh, registration is next week." And I was like, "Oh, no, 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 I'm not here for registration. Hi, I'm Adrienne Jones. We spoke on the phone." And then that's when the look came.
Mm.
And
Wow.
and that's where the battle started.
Yeah. Well, it's a battle of choice, you know.
Well, I'm
You
one of
know,
those people, I will, given the opportunity, I will try anything once.
yeah.
I'm a single mom, so I just saw this as another opportunity.
Hmm.
Um, didn't know that it was going to become a career. I just thought it was something I was trying out, and you know, I'm really good at what I do. And as I explained to my first class, I said, "Listen, I don't know how to teach anybody anything, but I'm really great at what I do." So my first year teaching, you know, I encourage, and they really worked with me. Tell me what you need in order to get the information to you.
Mm.
So I have to thank my students
Yeah.
for me becoming the educator that I am today.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing how, and that's another thing that I loved about teaching is that you not only instill gifts in your students, but then they also instill gifts in you as well.
Yes.
I love that about being in the classroom with those kids. And as I was preparing for our talk, a lot of memories of what I had gone through because I'm no longer in academia. I decided 2 years ago that it was time for me to step away. When I walked away from my career in fashion as a professor, I was actually serving as assistant dean for the College of the Arts and decided that it was time for me to begin to explore my own options for becoming an entrepreneur. And as I was preparing for our conversation, I could feel some of the PTSD that I faced, some of the things that I dealt with. I could feel it kind of creeping back up as I was going and developing these questions for you. I was like, oh my gosh. Like at first I was thinking, okay, is Adrienne going to be able to really get like to really talk about it? Because oftentimes when we are going through these things, and if we're still affiliated with the particular institution, it's hard to talk about. It's hard to talk about because we don't first off, we don't want to be reprimanded. We don't want to, have retaliation. We don't want to have all these things, happening with us. And one of the things that I want to make sure is that you're going to be like any question that I ask you, if you're not comfortable answering it, please, don't feel like you're obligated to answer any questions. So, because I know it's hard, I know it can be difficult to talk about, but I just want you to know that, you just let me know if there's something that you just, say, can we, step over that one or pass?
Um, I don't foresee that being a problem.
Okay.
Um, my my fight with Pratt became public.
Ah.
I was one of the first to say what you're doing is wrong, and
Mm,
I'm going to stick around. I'm going to stick
okay.
around, and so I would say maybe some of the newer administration may not know, but the majority of the people at Pratt do know about my history on that campus.
Yeah.
So it's not really a secret.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So some of the things that I learned in this process, and that I've read over time, has been the fact that African American women, when we're in the academy, there are certain things that we face. So some of those things include uh, being automatically believed as inferior just because of the fact that you're Black. That's one. Another thing is a lack of support system, being scrutinized, excessively scrutinized by your peers, having issues with um, the assumption that the positions that we got happened because of affirmative action or because they needed to fill a quota or whatever the case might be. Tokenism oftentimes is something that we deal with, being the only one, and denial of power structures normally associated with the position. So I would love for you to talk about some of the struggles that you dealt with, like when you first came into that space. What were some of the first things that you had to deal with? Because I remember when I first stepped in, one of the first things I had to deal with was this idea that I was inferior, and so I felt like in the beginning, I had to quote unquote prove myself that I was not inferior. And so I would love to hear about like some of those challenges that you had in the very beginning when you first started.
My challenges were not the same because the fashion department at that time was small.
Uh,
So I only knew the other people who worked within the department, and then it was just the ones that I saw on that day.
mm-hmm.
So I didn't really know a lot about, I didn't know anything about academia. I knew pattern making, I knew draping, I knew the skills that I had. Never concerned about being inferior because I knew how good I was, and I could prove
Mm-hmm.
that any day of the week.
Oh yeah.
So that was not a concern. And the other thing was other people didn't know I was there. So I want to say I was there for
I
about 5 years when we have the HEOP program on campus. And one of the students had gone to their counselor at the time, and somehow I came up in conversation. And
mm,
she said, "Wait a minute, you have a Black professor and you never told me?" And this woman took it upon herself. I'm so sorry because she was amazing to me, and I cannot recall her name right now. And she came over to my classroom and literally took me by the hand and introduced me to every Black and brown person on the campus.
mhm.
Um, and that was huge for me because up until that time, again, I only saw people coming and going, and
Mhm.
at the time there were no other Black professors in the department, so that was huge for me. And my mom always told me, wherever you go, make a friend.
Yeah.
So when I got introduced to all these, and I was excited because I hadn't seen anybody else. Maybe, in fact, I was only there part time, so I can't even say I was seeing people in the cafeteria. So I made sure that I made friends and connections with almost everybody, and the people that are still there, um, we're still friends.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
building that community became really important later on down the line.
Hmm. Hmm. Now, that is one thing, as a Black academic, it is critical that we find our tribe on our campus. Oftentimes, we have to go across campus to get support that we need. And so, one of the things that helped me survive through the challenges that I faced was having a support system across campus. We had a program, we had a organization on campus called PASFA, the Pan African Faculty and Staff Association, where it was, all the Black faculty, Black staff members on campus, and we came together. It was like a family. And that's one thing that I definitely do miss, because it is so critically important that we have support, especially if we can't get it in our department.
Well, we didn't have anything close to that. So when I
Hmm.
said I made friends, most of the people that I met were in administration. And the rest of the brown and Black people worked in security, um,
Mm-hmm.
worked in cafeteria, worked on
Mm-hmm.
the grounds. But
Mm-hmm.
so it wasn't pick and choose. It was I took everybody because I knew
Yeah.
I was going to need everybody. Um,
Yeah.
and whatever station they were in, if they were there and they accepted me, we were all in. We were
Yeah.
all in. So my tribe consists of everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. So, were there any times where you felt as though, as a Black woman, in order to get your tenure and promotion, that you had to do overly, exceedingly, past your colleagues in order to be recognized for that?
I'm going to make this real simple for you. Um, so I found out through another mentor of mine. She came to me one day and she says, "How come you're not applying for any promotions?" Again,
Mm,
I didn't come
mm,
from the higher education background, so I didn't know anything about it. And she says, "Well, you're not getting the information." And that's when I found out I wasn't receiving the emails about promotion. They just they just passed right over me. And I was hired as a visiting professor, whereas this one person in particular, when they hired her, they brought her in as an assistant professor. So they already gave her rank and trust. She didn't even have as much background as I did. But again, that's the later
mm.
part of the story. Um, so then I started questioning that, and I had to go across campus to a gentleman who at the time was running it's called BAP, the Black Alumni Association, Mr. Dwight Johnson. And so he became a huge mentor for me, and he informed me of all the things that I did not know about. He says, "You need to do this, you need to do this and that." And I just followed that to a T.
Mm.
Um, so there came a time when the chairperson that hired me was retiring, and she actually had said that she had wanted me to be acting chair. Now, I had been on the campus long enough to know whoever was chosen at that time as acting chair normally went on to be chairperson. Well, the steam and the smoke and the fire and the flames and the explosions that came out when powers that be within the department found out that she had wanted me to be acting chair, it just went all haywire. And I got a phone call one Friday that one of the people in the department had called a meeting. She was calling a meeting that Friday, and she was calling together all the instructors in the department to talk to them and tell them that they should be allowed to choose who gets the acting chair position. And so they were like, "You have to show up for this meeting." I didn't normally teach on Fridays. They're like, "No, you have to be here." And like I said before, it was a situation where you only knew the people that worked on the same day as you did. So there were
Mhm.
many people in the department that I had not yet met. So, unannounced to the people who put this meeting together, I showed up. Game
Wow.
changer.
Wow.
So I get to meet everybody and I sit down and they're like, "Oh, so what are your thoughts? What are your ideas on being chairperson?" And I was really excited about it because I saw holes that could have been plugged in. And I definitely thought I was the person to do that.
Yeah.
So I just gave, straight from the heart, this is what I can do. This is, what I'm willing to do. This is what I want to do. And the person that they were choosing, um, she just stood up and said, "Well, I can't top that." And that was the end of what she said. That was it. Um, for whatever reason, she got the vote. That's what I was told, and we'll just leave it at that.
Mm.
So she was acting chair, and then came then came the position for the full-time position for chairperson. So I'm like, okay, let's go in there again. Um, Again, through my parents, I was taught you want something as a Black person, as a Black woman, you're going to have to fight for it. And I was up for the challenge.
Mhm.
So I applied for the position. And in the job description, it said you had to at least have a terminal degree. Terminal meaning you had to be able to, you had to have at least the degree that the students were getting. I
Mhm.
was about 6 weeks away from my master's. This woman had an associate's degree,
Ah.
and they gave it to her. Um,
Whew.
so I was just like, okay, the fight is on. And I went, not having the money, I went to the Department of Human Rights and filed a suit. That's how I got a full-time position, the pushback. Now, was I qualified? Was I overqualified? Absolutely. But, and there were still people who questioned, did I think it was racist? And, at times you just got to look at this stuff and laugh. And it's like, yeah, yeah, definitely. They're like, oh no, Adrienne, I just think it's because you stood up and fought for yourself.
And that's a bad thing. Why?
I was a Black woman standing up for myself in an old white man's institution. Okay, you call it apples, I call it oranges.
Our story is very similar in that when, because I started off teaching part-time while I was getting my PhD. So I was teaching fashion design, maybe teaching one or two classes a semester while I was working on finishing up school. And so once I became ABD, that's all but dissertation. So I had finished up all my courses. I decided that I wanted to apply for a full-time position. And this was a position that was not a tenured track position. This was just a full-time instructor's role. And to get this particular job, you only needed to have a master's degree and some years of experience in the industry. I had already worked in the industry for about 5 years. And like I said, I was like halfway done with my PhD. So I was overqualified for this job. They passed me up on 3 different occasions. And everybody that they passed me up for was a white woman who had less education than me. At one point, they actually passed me up for somebody who had a bachelor's degree. And I was almost done with my PhD. After that particular moment, I went and talked to one of my mentors on campus, and she said, I'm taking you over to the affirmative action department and we're about to file a suit. And I went over there, filed, and magically, after that, magically got a job because they didn't want me to go to court and all this stuff. So they ended up hiring me full time. And me coming into that space in that way ruffled a whole bunch of people's feathers.
Oh,
And so,
yes.
and so please tell us what that was like, the fact that you had to go in and fight and get into the department that way. What was the response of your colleagues?
Well, not all of them knew. And Pratt didn't respond right away. It was 2 years. And I think they were waiting and saying, okay, well, if we don't answer, she'll just go away. I'm not that girl. I'm not that girl. I'll be in your face the whole time. And another community formed, which I privately call the Underground Railroad. People were amazing. Um, I didn't do when I filed my suit. I didn't do it publicly. I actually waited till the semester was over, and I actually filed here in Westchester.
Wow.
So I hadn't told anybody what I was doing. Um, and but when the paperwork got to Pratt, word just got around quietly. I remember one of the other departments I was teaching in, the secretary in that office called me one day over the summer, and she says, Adrienne, did you file a suit against Pratt? And I was like, yeah. How did you know about it? And she said, girl, they were talking about it at the bus stop. And so develop this quiet community of support.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it wasn't all, it wasn't all people of color.
Yeah.
There were some white people in there too who were just like, you know what, you are absolutely right. We have your back. Not so much in my department.
Of
Now,
course.
the ones who have been fighting against me from the beginning, um, I heard things like, well, you know why I don't want you to chair the department? And I was like, I don't know. And she said, because you don't come down and have lunch with me. So I stopped for a minute and I said, I'm tall. And I said, well, you know what? I'm too tall to bend over that far. And and walked away. Like, we're not doing this today. I had to deal with, the tears from the other side, like, oh, I didn't know this was happening. And it's like, you not only knew this was happening, you signed on to it. Um, and just a lot of just a lot. Just a
That's a
lot.
whole nother conversation right there about the tears. The
Oh,
tears. That's a
yeah,
whole nother
and they
conversation.
weren't mine. And they weren't
I
mine.
know. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I spent almost a little more than a third of the time that I've been at Pratt fighting. And but nobody ever came after the decision was made. Nobody ever came to me and wanted to fight me on why I did what I did. They kind of, went off to the side and ignored me, which I was already accustomed to. But the Black and Brown community on campus, they cheered me like I had just won the first football game for Pratt, and we were going to the nationals. Um, it was apparently a big deal. And when you're in a battle like that, you don't feel like that. You don't feel
Yeah.
like it was a big deal. Um, I knew I had won, but the victory left me with so many battle scars.
Oh yeah.
I just remember a lot of friends had said, "You should have a party. This is a celebration." And I wasn't up for it. And it wasn't until my mother sat me down and she says, "This is a celebration." And I said, "But Ma, I should not have been the first." And she said, "Well, too bad you are. And you have now opened that portal for a lot of other people who might have been afraid to say something. And it's worthy of a celebration. And we're going to have a party."
Mm.
And if that's what Mom said, that's what we did.
Yeah.
That's what we did.
Wow.
But it really took me a long time to recognize what I had done, um, as something, because for me, the fight was very, very personal. And it
Yeah.
took me a while to recognize that what I had done for so many other people, both
Yeah.
who had been there before and the ones who were coming,
Yeah.
and, and to accept that in stride, because people would say, "Oh, congratulations." And I said, "But it shouldn't have happened like that." And, people said to me, "But that wasn't on you.
Yeah.
That wasn't on you. That was on them." You know?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah,
I think
it was
I think one
heavy.
of Yeah, I think one of the reasons why you got so many amazing congratulations is because so many of us are afraid to speak up.
I didn't feel like I had anything to lose, you
And
know?
see, that's a lot of us feel like we do. Like we don't think that we have any control. We feel like if we speak up, we're going to lose our job or whatever the case might be. But you were so confident in yourself that if you were to lose your job, you have other skills that you can, monopolize off of,
But not
and so
only
you didn't.
that,
Yeah.
it wasn't just that. It was that they were dead wrong.
Oh yeah. Oh
They
yeah.
were absolutely dead wrong. And I wasn't going away without, you know, in your face, like you were
Hmm.
wrong.
Yeah.
You were wrong. If I
Yeah.
wasn't qualified, that was something different. But even the people at the Department of Human Rights said to me, "Well, wait a minute, who has the master's degree?" And I said, "I do." Well, wait a minute. Since when does somebody in academia who has a master's degree gets put over from somebody who only has an associate's degree? And I was like, and that's why I'm here. You know, and
Hmm.
it still sounds unbelievable, but it happened.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But again, a lot of us are afraid to speak up. It you put it,
I just didn't have that fear.
yeah.
And I heard from close friends. I heard from some Black administration on campus. You know, I remember one person said to me, "Well, how can you bite the hand that feeds you?" And I was like, "Feeds me?" I said, "I'm still hungry." You know, so yeah, that's what I'm going for. And other people said, "Well, why don't you just leave and go somewhere else?" And I said, "You don't think that this is happening on campuses nationwide?" And it's still happening, you know. Um,
Because this happened to you when? What was the year that this happened to you?
let's see. I got full time in, I want to say 99 or 2000.
And then it happened to me in 2010.
Okay, because I got tenure in 2005, something like
So,
that.
mhm. So it's still, this is the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because this is still happening to us.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
it's still happening. People don't like to believe that it's happening, but it is still happening.
And even more so because Pratt is in Brooklyn, New
Mm,
York, which is,
yeah,
you know, one of the most artistic, I think it's one of the most artistic capitals of the world,
yeah,
and the art coming from Black and Brown people.
yeah.
So, you know, it was just like this doesn't even make sense to me. And it's the
Mhm.
whole color thing. Even as a kid, my parents protected me so much from race and racism. Um, so it just, the child in me still doesn't understand um, being treated differently just because my skin is a darker shade than yours. It doesn't make sense to me.
It doesn't. It
And
doesn't make
these days
sense.
and times, I mean, look what's happening in Florida, and in Texas, and I think it's horrific. And now the
Yeah.
fact that, you know, the Supreme Court has struck down affirmative action, um, like they already know that a big part of the key to our success is the ability to go and get more education, higher education. You know, my mother had a high school education, and my dad, who I've always thought was the most brilliant man I've ever known, only got as far as the third grade. So going to college was not an option for me. You know,
Yeah.
just like everything else, they birthed that into me. This is what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Um, and the powers that are fighting against us, they know that education is the key.
Absolutely. They've known it all along.
Oh, absolutely.
All
So they
along.
take that from us, but I don't think that they realize that as a people, we'll get where we're supposed to be, whether you help us get there or not.
Yeah, we have Senate Bill 83 here in Ohio, where they have taken away all of the funding that's geared towards any kind of diversity efforts, any initiatives dedicated to underrepresented peoples has been taken away. And so that whole affirmative action thing is also happening here in Ohio as well.
And we take a deep sigh.
Yes. So, can you offer any survival strategies for Black women that are in the academy who maybe have been the first, maybe are still the only one? Can you offer any, what survival strategies did you employ to, ensure your success?
Well, first and foremost was that community, that tribe. That
Mhm.
is so important because
Mhm.
the information that I wasn't getting within my own department, there were some bodies there who made sure that I got the information I needed.
Mhm.
Um, you know, make a right instead of making a left. Giving me that direction. So that's huge. That's
Yeah.
huge. And within that community, there were mentors. I'm still grateful to my mentors who I talk to, if not on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. Um, there's always been somebody that I was able to go to and say, listen, I'm going through this. Um, can you help me? Do you have any advice? Is there somebody else that I can go to? And there was always somebody willing to help me get through. So, and again, it wasn't just, the majority of that community was Black and brown, but there were some white people who showed up for me in
Mhm.
ways that, they opened doors that the rest of us couldn't get open,
Yeah.
you know, and appreciate that because it's not always a black and white thing. A lot of
Yeah.
times it is. I am not I am not disclaiming that. A lot of times it is because people will look at you and judge you just based on your color alone and whatever madness is on in their head.
Yeah.
You know, until they find you to be acceptable. I don't need anybody else to accept me. I'm good. I'm good
Yeah.
on my own with my tribe.
Yeah. Yeah. So the strategy, for those of you that didn't catch it, the strategy was to make sure
Build
that you
that community.
get your community together and get you some mentors together.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Absolutely.
because there were
Yeah.
definitely people who had gone through the same thing before.
Yeah.
I remember there was this gentleman. I know people are screaming at me. They're trying to tell me his name through here, but he was one of the first Black men to be on the board of directors at Pratt, and he was a huge man. He was like 6'4", 6'5". And so I would see him, around campus, but we never had a conversation. And when I came back to campus after all was said and done, of course, by this time, everybody knew. There was no
Mhm.
announcement that needed to be made.
Mhm.
And he came, this huge man, I remember, and he was always dressed so well. And he came down to my classroom and for the first time actually spoke to me. And he said, I just want to say congratulations. And he said, but I also want to apologize. And I didn't understand what the apology was for. And he said, because you should have never had to go through this. There should have
Mhm.
been somebody before you that took up this fight.
Mm.
Apologize for you because you had to go through it. And it was like, well, somebody had to do it.
Yeah.
Somebody
Yeah.
had to do it. I just didn't know it was going to be me.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Do you have anything that you would like to talk about that we didn't discuss? Any thoughts or any other words in regards to your experience that you would like to talk about?
Whatever it is in life that you find to be a challenge, I always say stick with it. Stick with it because there's a reason that that challenge has been presented to you.
Mhm.
Um, and if you walk away from it, trust and believe it will show up again in your life until you face that challenge. So, you know, put that full body armor on, whatever it is that you need, and just get through it because life is one challenge after another. You
Yeah.
know, I don't regret what I did. I'm not going to apologize for it. And I hope that others that came along with me or that came along after me um, took a part of that with them on their journey
Yeah.
so that they can say, you know what, the impossible really is possible.
Yeah.
And it's going to be hard. But again, like my mom always said to me, anything that you really want, you're going to have to fight for it. Nobody in this life, nobody's giving you anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
And when they do show up, be so grateful.
Yeah.
Don't ever take that for granted. That dose of gratitude will get you further than anything else.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Wow. Well, this was a great conversation. Thank you for being open about your experience. And for those of you that are listening that may be going through this experience, just know that you are not alone. You do have people that care about you and want to see you succeed. You just have to make the opportunity available for them to be able to help you and support you. Yeah,
Yes,
this, it's quite difficult, but it is definitely doable. And having the honor of being a trailblazer um, it really is, it's a true honor. And I, have been able to make the way for other people coming behind me, and I don't regret that at all. And the reason why I don't regret it is because every experience that we have adds to our story. And now
absolutely.
I have a
Absolutely.
dynamic story to tell,
Yes.
a
Yes.
dynamic story that I can share. And so if that never happened to me, I wouldn't have this fabulous story that I could tell.
Right.
And so, for those of you that may be going through it, one thing that I will suggest, and the reason why I keep bringing this up is because I've experienced this so many times about the fact you're an anomaly, Adrienne, saying that you were never afraid to speak up and that kind of thing. There are so many of our colleagues colleagues of color that are afraid to speak up and that will endure the injustice. Like the one person had asked you about biting the hand that feeds you. That's a fear statement
Right.
right there.
Right.
That's fear speaking. And so if Adrienne and I can leave you with anything, speak up. When something
Yes.
speak up. When
Because
something
otherwise it will wear on you and it will
yes,
wear you down,
absolutely.
and if what you're doing is what you believe in, we need you in every arena that we have, you know, for students to come in. For about 10 years, I also taught at a community college. And well, I knew going in I was the only because it was a community college and they needed me in order to get state funding. Um, but to see the look on the students' faces, because the majority of the students were Black and brown, when they walked in the classroom for the first time and saw me, then you're doing something right.
Mhm.
And to still be in contact with some of these students today, one of them, she just recently got married. It's beautiful to know that you have touched someone else's life in that way.
Yeah,
And as people of color, we can't go out the door afraid. We
yeah.
can't, because there's always something or someone looking to knock us down. But
Mhm.
but know that not only can you get back up, not only can you get through the fire, but trust that there is somebody's hand reaching out to you to pull you through that.
Mm,
But
mm.
we just can't get so swamped in our everyday battle that we don't look for that hand.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, wow. And one last thing I'll say is that even in the fight, excellence is possible.
Oh, excellence was possible before we started the fight. That's why there's a fight.
Absolutely. Even when you're going through it, you still have a responsibility to be excellent. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And so how can audiences get in touch with you for people to want to stay in touch with you, social media or email? How can the
Okay,
audience?
so email is ajones@pratt.edu. Social media is on Instagram, Black Dress Exhibit. And that's a whole nother, we'll have to do a whole nother podcast on that. Um, and the website is blackdressexhibit.com.
Nice, nice. And I'll make sure that once this episode is ready to load on the platforms, I'll make sure I put all that information in the description for you all. So I want to say thank you. Thank you for joining me this evening. It was an honor to speak to you. Thank you, Meredith. If you are watching, thank you for connecting Adrienne and I. This was a beautiful conversation. And
Thank you, Meredith.
yes, yes, yes. Oh, I love those sleeves, honey. Let me see those sleeves. Oh my gosh. It's beautiful. And see, as a person in fashion, I can always just admire. And one of the first things that I said to Adrienne when she first came on, I said, "Oh, your background is so beautiful." It's just, and she just, I mean, just blends, everything just blends so well together. Just such a beautiful woman, a beautiful background, and a beautiful story. Thank you so much, Adrienne.
Thank you, Dr. Tameka. And
You're welcome.
hopefully we'll get an opportunity to speak again.
Absolutely. I look forward to it. Have a good night.
Okay, you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So that conversation was beautiful. It's important that we understand how imperative it is for us to speak up. Um, every time when I get ready to do this podcast, I always do some research. I'm a fashion scholar. Research is something that I always do. And I find that it's very, very important to do research so that when I come with these topics, they're not just coming from anywhere. They're coming from actual research. They're coming from things that are relevant to the advancement of Black people. And so one of the pieces of research that I read while I was preparing for this conversation with Adrienne is a book called Presumed Incompetent. And so I'm going to go ahead and put that on the screen so that you all can see it. Presumed Incompetent: The Intersection of Race and Class for Women in the Academy, by these. It's edited by 4 different authors. You can see their names there. But this book probably has like at least 500 pages. It's an anthology, 500-page anthology that has the stories of over 30 women in the academy, women of color, talking about their experience. This, and the reason why this book is so important, and the reason why this conversation with Adrienne is so important, is because this is not an anomaly. This continues to happen. It's happening everywhere, regardless of whether or not people are talking about it or not. This is still happening. Another public example of the fact that this is happening is with, I'm sure you all remember the story of the Professor Nicole Hannah Jones, who was at a university who didn't get tenure. She's actually the person that did the 1619 project. She ended up not getting tenure at her university, knowing good and well that her scholarship was phenomenal, right? But she was at a predominantly white institution. She did not get tenure and promotion, and therefore she left and went and took her services elsewhere. And one of the things that I want to make very, very clear to us is that we do have options. We are not locked in to stay anywhere. You have control over your situation, and you can move beyond that. But please get that book. If you can't get the book, is huge. Like I said, if you can't get the book, go to the library. Your library may have it, or if they don't have it, ask your library to get a copy of this book, Presumed Incompetent. So many amazing stories of strife, of triumph, and you will thoroughly enjoy it, especially if you are someone in the academy who is experiencing these injustices. So you need to know that you are not by yourself. And so this particular episode of the Black Beauty Activist podcast is brought to you by my 5th book, Black Hair in a White World. If you have not gotten your copy, please go and get your copy today. You can get it on Bookshop, Barnes and Nobles, or Amazon. This book has already made a tremendous impact on the world. I've been going on tour with this book. My next stop that I am going to will be, I'll be in Chicago, and then I'll be at Ohio State University, the Ohio State University, touring with this book. And I'm looking forward to touring other places and speaking about the phenomenon that is Black beauty. So if you haven't gotten your copy, go ahead and pick up your copy today. I appreciate the love and the support. And if your organization, university, or college is looking to host, or maybe want to host me, please connect with me. My website is drtamekaellington.com, and then go to the contact form, and we can, have you fill that out, and we can start a conversation about how I can come and visit your university. But I would love to just say thank you all for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please like it, leave a comment on YouTube, and share it with those in your circle who you believe will benefit. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't done so already, the Black Beauty Activist Podcast. And always remember, on the other side of fear is your beautiful confidence. Peace and blessings, everybody.